Hello and welcome to The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood. Today standing in for Gloria De Piero. Today we've got an amazing show coming up with varied issues in Westminster. Ambulance waiting times, the Pestminster scandal rolls on, and a very special Real Me with a recently elected Labour MP. So much to come over the next hour. Do stay with us, but first, here are the headlines.
Good afternoon to you. It's just 1 minute past 12. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GBNews. Some breaking news this hour. A major incident has been declared following an explosion in Bedford. Videos posted on social media show flames engulfing a block of flats in the Redwood Grove area of the town. All 3 emergency services have responded to the incident. It's not known yet if there are any casualties. Bedford Fire and Rescue Service is telling people to avoid the area and to keep windows and doors closed. Of course, we'll keep you up to date on this developing story. The shooting in Copenhagen is not thought to be linked to terror, with Danish police saying there's no evidence to support that. At least 3 people were killed and 4 injured when a gunman opened fire in one of the biggest shopping centres in the country yesterday. Police believe the gunman was shooting people at random. Video from outside the complex shows shoppers running away. Witnesses say others hid inside. A 22-year-old Danish man is appearing in court today. Peter Nordsmark's daughter was in the shopping centre when the shooting started.
Yeah, it was terrible because she was calling me that there are gunshots in fields, there's a shooting, I'm running out and I heard in the background as he said that, these 2 boom, boom, something like that, I could hear it.
The Prime Minister is facing calls to explain what he knew about allegations of inappropriate behaviour involving MP Chris Pincher before giving him a job. Boris Johnson is alleged to have called him Pincher by name, Pincher by nature, before making him Deputy Chief Tory Whip. Chris Pincher was suspended from the Conservative Party and resigned after claims emerged he groped 2 men last week. 6 new allegations have emerged since, dating back several years, all of which Mr Pincher denies. The Minister for Children, Will Quinn, says he's had assurances the Prime Minister knew nothing about those additional claims.
Having heard about the testimony and what's now coming out in the papers over the past few days, I can't believe that anybody, let alone the Prime Minister, in the knowledge of that information, would have appointed Chris Pincher to government, let alone to the position of Deputy Chief Whip.
8 protesters have been arrested after go-slow motorway demonstrations against high fuel prices. The eastbound carriageway of the River Severn crossing has been closed. Several other slow-driving demonstrations have been taking place across the UK. It's as the price of petrol hit a record high of more than 191.5 pence per litre. Protester Vicky Stampster says she lost her job as a lorry driver because she couldn't afford to fill up.
People need to realise that the government works for us, not the other way around. And I think a lot of people have mistaken that. And they need to pull the head out the backsides, basically, and wake up to this. Because it's not going to end until something gets done.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has vowed to regain lost territory as Russia claims full control of the eastern Luhansk region of the country. Ukraine's forces withdrew from the bombed-out city of Lysychansk, saying it was a tactical decision to save the lives of soldiers. They plan for troops to regroup to launch a counter-offensive with the help of long-range Western weapons. Well, the UK's Foreign Secretary Liz Truss today will pledge Britain's long-haul support for Ukraine. Parents are going to be asked about government proposals to change the number of toddlers that can be looked after at any one time by nurseries and individual child carers. The plan is to change the staff-to-child ratios from currently 1 to 4 to 1 to 5 to help parents with childcare costs. The government suggests it will save them about £40 a week. The childcare sector, though, says it's going to put staff under pressure and that any costs saved are unlikely to be passed on. Pope Francis is weighing in on the US Supreme Court's decision on abortion. During an exclusive interview with Reuters on Saturday, he strongly condemned abortion, comparing it to hiring a hitman. The Catholic Church teaches that life begins at the moment of conception. A number of postal workers have been left with permanent and disabling injuries from dog attacks. More than 1,600 incidents have been reported in the last year. The Royal Mail says the average was 32 attacks taking place every week across the UK. A new species of a giant water lily in Kew's Royal Botanic Gardens has been discovered. It's been hiding in plain sight for 177 years, having previously been mistaken as another species. It's also the world's largest water lily, with leaves that can grow more than 3 metres wide. This is GB News, and I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's return to the briefing with Tom.
Welcome to the briefing with me, Tom Harwood. Coming up this hour, pincher by name, pincher by nature. That's what Boris Johnson is alleged to have said about his former deputy chief whip. As more allegations emerge about inappropriate behaviour, the Prime Minister is under pressure to outline what he knew and when. And what's your view on assisted dying? There's a public petition debate on this controversial subject today. And I'll be joined by Conservative MP Andrew Mitchell to discuss it. We've a moving interview as well with a mother whose 18-year-old son died of a heart attack earlier this year after the ambulance took 17 minutes to reach him and they couldn't get hold of a defibrillator. She and her local MP, Mark Pawsey, have been campaigning for change. He'll join me live in the studio. And Gloria's latest Real Me interview is with the Labour MP Feryal Clark, who became a mum shortly after being elected in 2019 after 5 rounds of IVF. And it's 40 years since Terry Higgins died from AIDS-related illness. In the decades since, almost unimaginable progress has been made and many thousands of lives have been saved. I'll talk with Richard Angel from the trust founded in his name. Well, first today, this afternoon, MPs will debate assisted dying, following a public petition calling for the government to bring forward laws to legalise helping people end their lives in certain circumstances. Conservative MP Andrew Mitchell was against it when he entered the House of Commons in 1987, but since then he's had a change of heart. He's now chair of the cross-party group Choice at the End of Life. And I'm pleased to be joined now by Andrew Mitchell himself. Welcome to the show, Andrew. I hope you won't mind that before we get into the very important subject that is this assisted dying debate, of course, Westminster has been really under pressure from all of these allegations about many members of Parliament, first, most prominently, of course, in recent days, Christopher Pincher. Did the government, did the Prime Minister move too slowly to withdraw the whip from him?
Well, good afternoon, Tom. And you asked me to come on the programme to talk about assisted dying, and that's really what I want to talk about. But in respect of your question, the point I would want to make out to your listeners is I think the vast majority of members of Parliament behave entirely properly. They work very hard for their constituents, regardless of which party they are. And most of them do a very good job. And I wouldn't want all this talk that's going around at the moment to colour the perception of members of Parliament as a whole.
Well, I suppose we will wait to see what the multiple investigations turn out to say. Moving on to assisted dying, of course, you've been on a journey yourself on this issue. What was the moment when you decided to have that change of heart? What changed your mind from being against it in terms of becoming in favour of assisted dying?
Well, I was always against it, and I thought it was humans interfering in the natural order of things and, if you like, playing God. But over the years, I have completely changed my mind, mostly from listening to the experiences of my constituents who've come to see me in my advice sessions and have told me about the awful experience at the end of life of people they loved, perhaps their husband or their son, indeed, in some cases. And I've sort of cried with them at these appalling stories. And I've concluded that this act of choice that my constituents want at the end of life is one I would want for myself and those people whom I love. And, you know, I think in Britain it will be the next big social reform. All the polling shows that 87% of our constituents want to have this choice at the end of their life with very, very strict safeguards. what we want to see does not go far enough for some of our supporters, but we want people basically to be able to exercise this choice at the end of life if they are within 6 months of the time that they will die, if they are terminally ill, if they are frightened of dying in pain or in great indignity. We think they should have this choice that they and their families can make together. And that's why so many people have signed this petition and why we're going to be debating it in the House of Commons this afternoon.
Intellectually, it does seem that this is a rational thing to do, that this is an individualist thing to do, that this is something that respects personal and individual autonomy and sovereignty. Although people are concerned about the limits that are drawn, about the pressure that people may feel may be placed under by their families, or indeed whether or not that diagnosis, that sort of termination date that is set, is really accurate. How would these safeguards work in practice?
Well, already in social security law, there is a way of deciding whether or not someone is within 6 months of the end of their life. But in what we are proposing, the safeguard would be that there would be 2 doctors who would make clear that it was the individual's decision and also that they are within 6 months of the end of their life. And in terms of whether or not they could be pressured, which of course is a legitimate concern, our proposals would see a High Court judge looking at every single end-of-life application in this way. So we've sought very directly to confront both those 2 criticisms. And let me be clear, Tom, I don't criticise those who take a different view. I don't think they're bad or evil. People can reach these conclusions for themselves in their own way. And having talked to many of my colleagues, I know how hard they are thinking about the case for and the case against. But what I can tell you is that over the last 2.5 years since the general election, something like 100 colleagues have come to our side of the argument. And that's why I say I do think it will be the next big reform to come, the big social reform that we make in this country, just as they're making it in so many other countries, in so many states in the USA, in Australia, in New Zealand, where there was a referendum last year. 66% of all those who voted said this was the right change to make. And it's being discussed in Scotland. I think it will be debated very soon there and probably implemented. Jersey, the Isle of Man. These are all parts of the Anglo zone, if you like, where social opinion and comment on the law is moving in this direction.
And yet the debate today in Parliament is clearly a milestone along this journey, but won't necessarily change the law in terms of how the United Kingdom regulates assisted dying. The government would need to come on board with your proposals. Have you had discussions with ministers? Have you heard many positive soundings in this direction from the government?
Well, you're quite right that the debate on the petition today is an opportunity for members of Parliament to express their views on behalf of their constituents, both for and against. That is correct. And in a way, until we have a bill before the House of Commons, probably a private member's bill, the status quo is not going to change. And the government obviously needs to be careful because the government is neutral. When a minister speaks about this, they take off their ministerial hat and put on their hat as a member of Parliament representing their constituents. So the government has no view on this. The government says quite rightly it's for members of Parliament and for Parliament to make up their mind. But there is, of course, a slight danger that in this situation, if time isn't given on the floor of the House so that the House of Commons can exercise its view, the government inevitably becomes on the side of the status quo and not on the side of change. And I think that is an issue for the government to reflect on, but not at the moment because there is no bill. But that could well be the case quite soon now.
Well, really interesting note to end on there, Andrew Mitchell. Thank you so much for joining us on the briefing this afternoon. A really fascinating issue that will no doubt become bigger and bigger as time goes on. Well, next we'll be talking with Conservative MP for Rugby, Mark Pawsey, and his constituent, Jamie Issitt. Her 18-year-old son, Jamie, died from cardiac arrest on New Year's Day when an ambulance took 17 minutes to reach him. Well, before that, let's take a look at the weather.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. A breezy day with showers in the north, but drier weather further south with some sunshine, although there is a lot of cloud at the moment as a couple of features sink south across the UK. Low pressure to the north, but high pressure is edging in, and that through the week will bring more and more settled weather, drier and warmer conditions for many, but not for all, because there will be some rain at times in the north and northwest especially, and a keen breeze at times, and that's the case through the rest of the day. The showers continuing for northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some heavy downpours for northeast Scotland, and that blustery breeze making it feel cool, 17 or 18 Celsius. But further south, with some sunshine coming through away from areas of cloud, 22 to 24 Celsius, so feeling warm with lighter winds. Through the evening, any showers in the north tend to fade away, but there'll still be a few continuing for the north and northwest of Scotland, 1 or 2 coming into northwest England, North Wales. More persistent rain perhaps for Northern Ireland, where it will be cloudy and 12 degrees. 10 or 11 elsewhere with some clear spells, especially towards the south and the east. So some sunshine first thing for southern England, the Midlands into eastern England. Bright spells as well for Scotland, with a few showers affecting northwest England, North Wales and Northern Ireland. But spell of more prolonged rain turns up later in the afternoon into western Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland. And again, high teens in the north, low 20s further south, not quite as warm, and actually a fair amount of cloud again for central and southern parts of the UK. So although the trend through the week is for dry conditions in the south and changeable in the north, there will be a lot of cloud for many. And it's going to be a damp day on Wednesday for western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Further south, some sunshine and turning warmer Thursday and Friday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. Now, Jamie Issitt was at a friend's house on New Year's Day when he collapsed. The ambulance took 17 minutes to arrive, and his friends had no access to a defibrillator. He later died in hospital, aged just 18. Now, his mother, Naomi Issitt, and the Conservative MP for Rugby, Mark Pawsey, are campaigning for more defibrillators and for A&E services in Rugby. Gloria De Piero talked with Naomi last week.
Jamie was out with his friends at his best friend's parents' house in Rugby on New Year's Eve. They watched some fireworks. They were having a dance in the garage, and just having fun really, New Year's Eve, him and 4 of his friends, and about 2:20 a.m. on New Year's Day, Jamie sat down on the floor and collapsed. He told his friend he just felt funny, he wasn't sure why, and the next thing they realised that Jamie wasn't breathing and he'd gone into cardiac arrest. Jamie's best friend's mum called 999, and his other best friend, Josh, also called 999, and they started doing CPR on Jamie straight away. Josh, mainly, his best friend, was doing the CPR, but the ambulance just took such a long time to get there. The police turned up in the meantime, but sadly they didn't have a defibrillator in the police car, so they had to wait then for another police officer to go and get the defibrillator from the local police station, and the ambulance unfortunately took over 17 and a half minutes to reach Jamie, which, you know, we've now been told was just too long. Jamie just went too long with no oxygen.
Gosh, I'm so sorry to hear that. You've reached out to your MP, haven't you? You tell me when and why.
Well, it was within a few weeks, really. I mean, like every parent, we just wanted reasons. We wanted to understand. We know now that Jamie passed away following the lack of oxygen, and his cardiac arrest was due to sudden arrhythmic death syndrome. So it didn't really give us any reasons, and we wanted to understand why everything took so long, and we decided to speak to our MP, Mark Pawsey. There was a number of different things we wanted to talk to him about. The delay with the ambulance obviously was the main one. We were told by the people on the scene that, you know, they were literally screaming down the phone, "Where's the ambulance? Why is it taking so long?" And we wanted an understanding of why the nearest ambulance was 15 miles away. But we were also sort of asking Mr. Pawsey about accessible defibrillators in our area. We started a campaign really soon after we lost Jamie, really something as a family for us to focus on, to try and install defibrillators across our town, because obviously our nearest hospital is 15 miles away in Coventry. In Rugby, we have no accident and emergency, no main hospital, no trauma centre, no standby ambulance. The last one of those got removed in September of last year. So, you know, not that we should have to look for another option, but we were looking as a family to get these accessible defibrillators installed across Rugby. The nearest defibrillator to Jamie on the night he collapsed was actually 3 minutes away, but sadly locked inside a school. So the chances of his friends being able to get to that, especially on New Year's Eve or in a school holiday, was zero. So we decided as a family that we were going to get these accessible 24/7 defibrillators, put as many places as we possibly can. We fight because we have to for Jamie. It's the only way we've got left to care about him and get an understanding. And we've never, ever blamed an ambulance crew or a paramedic. And we know that everything the police and the paramedics did when they reached Jamie, it was all they could do. But like I've said so many times, it must be soul destroying for those ambulance crews to know that they are 17 minutes away from somebody who isn't breathing and has no heartbeat.
Absolutely. So you've got your campaign, you're doing amazingly on your campaign. The campaign is called OurJay. You've put very clearly what the demands are, and you've got a walk coming up too. Tell us about that, finally.
Yeah, so obviously we're doing the fundraising for Jamie, for the defibrillators, but kind of a bit separate to that, we started the OurJay Foundation, and part of that is that we will be walking 17.3 kilometres for Jamie on the 17th of July. So our walk really is to signify the 17.33 minutes that Jamie waited for help. So myself and 17 other ladies are walking that. Again, we've been backed by the businesses of Rugby, and we will be meeting at Jamie's college, which is the first place we had one of his defibrillators installed in March. And we just hope that a lot of people are going to be there to support us and show our MP and the ambulance service and Sajid Javid how passionately we feel about getting this change for Jamie.
I hope it goes well. It's been such a I wish we hadn't had to speak because, of course, we wish that Jamie was here. But my goodness.
Well, like we've said all along, 17.33 minutes is just too long. It's, you know, when you're in cardiac arrest, your chances of survival decrease by 10% per minute. And Jamie was just left with no chance of survival. And, you know, he deserves to still be here. He was the most amazing boy. He still is the most amazing boy. And he's just missed. This is just our only way to carry on looking after him.
Well, that was Jamie's mother, Naomi, speaking with Gloria last week. Well, let's bring in Mark Pawsey now, the Conservative MP for Rugby, who's been working closely with Naomi, Jamie's mother, of course, to bring about change. It's the most heartbreaking story that you could possibly imagine. How soon did Naomi come to you after this tragedy?
Naomi came to my office in around early February and gave me exactly the account she's just given to your viewers, and it was incredibly moving, and it's you know, testament to her that she's got this campaign together really on 2 points really. One is about the accessibility of ambulances in Rugby, which has been an issue for many of my constituents, and she set out exactly why that's an issue. And secondly, the bit about access to defibrillators. I mean, how frustrating for Jamie's friends to know that there was a defibrillator in the school very nearby, but it was locked up inside the school building. And so a big part of the campaign is to get these defibrillators externally mounted. But Tom, one of the reasons why people don't want to mount them externally is that they're subject to vandalism and people steal the components. And there are other instances where a supermarket chain puts them on the outside of their buildings and then puts them in the building at the end of the day. We've taken that up with the issue of, you know, the sentences for people who steal or damage them with the Justice Secretary. Had to reply there the measures are there, but it's a matter of getting the evidence when those things happen. So an externally mounted defibrillator, I think, costs 3 times the price of an internally mounted one. So for every 3 that are indoors and locked away, you can only get 1 outdoors. And the other problem is who's responsible for them. There doesn't seem to be, there are plenty of organisations, people like Naomi, who are working really hard to raise money through charity, but nobody seems to take responsibility for them. My own view, and I express this to ministers, is that the ambulance service should have a responsibility for them. It assists the ambulance service in providing their service. We know there's an issue about the time it took to get to Jamie, but if the ambulance service looked after them, there might be a better chance of them being kept in good condition. Yes. And I've got an analogy there, and that's that in the old days of payphones, a member of each BT staff would be responsible for a payphone and look at it daily and just check it's okay, and that way any faults with it could be reported. I'm sure there's an army of volunteers out there who would be willing to adopt an external defibrillator, check on it daily, and then we can make sure they're in good condition.
That's a really interesting point there, an almost big society solution to this problem, because it's so interesting. We talk so often, or we hear in the news so often about there being X number of defibrillators in an area, but that almost doesn't matter unless they're accessible. That's the key distinction.
Absolutely, and we've got a register of defibrillators. I'm not sure that it identifies whether they're internal or external. So, and if people dial 999, the response service can tell people where the nearest defibrillator is. But I think there's something like 2/3 of the defibrillators that have been installed that aren't on that register. So the first thing is to get that register completely up to date. But then let's do some work on having somebody taking charge and not leaving it to community organisations. I mean, Naomi says, you know, why should it be for us to, you know, to raise money through a charitable cause to provide these things? They should be provided by the health service, and they should be maintained by the health service.
Well, talking about that first point now, the ambulance waiting time. What's the practical solution to this? Because we know that the NHS has had tens of billions more funding pumped into it. We know all of our taxes have gone up in order to pay for more services on the NHS, catching up with the backlog, all of that sort of stuff. It's not really about money necessarily here.
No, it's about efficiency of the service. And one of the challenges is the very great demand in accident and emergency. In some cases, people who really should be being seen by primary care, leading to congestion at the hospitals. We know in Jamie's case that the ambulance came from Coventry and it was there discharging a patient. They weren't able to discharge the patient because on New Year's Eve, 2 o'clock in the morning, A&E's a pretty busy place. So the ambulance was waiting there, and that's why it took that critical 17 minutes to get from Coventry to Rugby to attend to Jamie. So we need to improve discharge. We've raised it with the West Midland Ambulance Service. They've done a thorough investigation. They come back with the challenge of getting patients discharged from the ambulances into A&E, and we just need to make that smoother. And then the other bit is the link with social care, so that those who are coming out can get cared for and provide the spaces. So there's a great deal there. The problem in Rugby is that we had a community ambulance station, which was where a crew would pick up an ambulance. We don't have that anymore. That gave a reason for an ambulance to be more likely in Rugby, and Rugby doesn't have an A&E where ambulances take the patients to. So again, both of those factors mean that there is less likely to be an ambulance in the Rugby area. The ambulance service say measure us by our response times, and their service is about getting ambulances to people in time and not about buildings. But it's an issue.
But those response times clearly.
Sure, absolutely. And it's an issue that my
scratch.
constituents are bringing to me week after week.
Well, Mark Pawsey, thank you so much for coming in, bringing this story to us, and of course to your constituents. Such an awful tragedy, but a silver lining there in terms of the community, the campaign, and potentially the positive change.
Absolutely, and NAEM is fighting an absolutely tremendous campaign and getting awareness on both of these issues.
Well, Mark, thank you. Well, moving on now. Next, it's Gloria De Piero's latest Real Me interview with Feryal Clark, the Labour MP for Enfield. She became a mum shortly after being elected in 2019, and unlike Stella Creasy, who's been campaigning to allow babies in the chamber, she thinks Parliament treats new mums well. And it's 40 years today since Terence Higgins became one of the first people in the United Kingdom to die of AIDS-related illness. He left a lasting legacy, which has saved countless lives since. I'll talk with Richard Angel from the Terence Higgins Trust. But first, it's the headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 12:32. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date on GB News. A major incident's been declared following a gas explosion in Bedford. Witnesses described seeing a person jumping from a second-floor window to escape as flames engulfed a block of flats in the Redwood Grove area of the town. All 3 emergency services have responded to the incident. Bedford Fire and Rescue Service is telling people to avoid the area and keep the windows and doors closed. Danish police say there's no indication the deadly shooting in Copenhagen yesterday was an act of terror. At least 3 people were killed and 4 were critically injured when a gunman opened fire in one of the biggest shopping centres in the country. A 22-year-old Danish man is appearing in court today. The Prime Minister is facing further calls to explain what he knew about allegations of inappropriate behaviour involving MP Chris Pincher before giving him a job. Boris Johnson is alleged to have called him Pincher by name, Pincher by nature, before making him Deputy Chief Whip of the Conservative Party. Mr Pincher resigned last week as Deputy Chief Whip and was suspended from the Conservative Party for allegedly groping 2 men. 6 new allegations have since come to light, all of which Mr Pincher denies. EasyJet's Chief Operating Officer, Peter Bellew, has resigned amid a series of flight cancellations and delays over the last few weeks. Many flights axed on the day they were due to depart. The airline sector as a whole has been struggling with staff shortages post-COVID. Well, EasyJet's CEO said everyone at the airline was focused on delivering reliable services this summer. 8 protesters have been arrested after go-slow motorway demonstrations against high fuel prices. The eastbound carriageway of the River Severn crossing has been closed. Several other slow-driving demonstrations have been taking place across the UK today. It's as the price of petrol hit a record high of more than 191.5 pence per litre. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Shortly, we'll be back to Tom for the briefing.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. Well, now it's time for the latest in Gloria De Piero's series of Real Me interviews. She talked with Labour's Feryal Clark MP, who became a mum shortly after being elected as an MP in 2019. It took her 5 rounds of IVF.
So, you're 42. You were born in Turkey. Why did you come to the UK? When did you come?
I was. So my parents migrated to UK in the 80s. So my family are Kurdish. And there's Kurds are prosecuted across Middle East, where it was not a happy place in the 80s. So they were political asylum seekers here. And they found home in London Borough of Hackney, where I grew up. But yeah.
And how does that make you feel about the political debate about asylum seekers today?
A little bit angry, because when my family came here, and when I was a child, I went to primary school here, and all my upbringing was in this country, in this city. Our city, our neighbourhood, our community was a lot more welcoming. I remember my first days in this country where we spent a lot of time in the church, where there were a lot of Kurdish people who were leaving the country at the time, and remember lots of people bringing toys for us, for the kids at churches. And so as I said, it was a lot more welcoming, but also the government policy was a lot more welcoming. It was a lot more supportive. I just think, and it was much easier for my family to come across. There was no visas. It was a lot safer, and my family didn't have to do some of the perilous journeys that a lot of people are having to do. And people don't leave their homes. People don't take such horrible risks with their children, their families. Because it's fun. People are doing it because they are escaping war zones. So yeah, it is very sad. It's very, very sad where we've got to.
You mentioned the church. Are you religious today? Do you have faith?
I'm not. I'm Kurdish, and I belong to a minority faith called Alevism, and it was banned in Turkey. So they weren't, when I was growing up, you weren't allowed to practice it, and it's still discriminated. That people aren't, So I wasn't taught it. My parents didn't teach me it because, it was a way of them keeping us safe. So I don't know very much about my faith, and I'm not. I am spiritual, but not. I don't have a specific belief. But I'm hoping my daughter will join a religious community or a community where she learns about faith.
And you became pregnant with your daughter shortly after being elected to Parliament. You got in 2019, so at the last election, you've only been an MP for 2 and a bit years. So just talk us through, when did you get pregnant? in terms of the December 2019 election, and then you get pregnant when?
I did, yeah. So I got pregnant in August of 2020. It was halfway through. So the lockdown. So we'd gone into lockdown, and then it had eased over summer. So there's a lot. It was a bit more relaxed, and that's where I had my my baby through IVF, and I'd waited. I'd been going through IVF for a very long time, and I'd waited a long time to have my baby. So I decided not to waste any more time. And when I got the opportunity to go for IVF again, to have my transfers that summer, I did, and I was very lucky, and it worked.
Why did you have to have IVF? If that's not too personal question, were you trying for some time before?
Yeah. So no. I'd had. We'd been trying for several years, quite a few years, and I'd had several miscarriages, and so I went through IVF through NHS, which was an interesting experience.
In what way?
It's really tough. It's really tough to get there, convincing your GP, and then going through, and it's the waiting. I mean, I think women are so hard done by NHS anyway, on every front. But on fertility and IVF, it's just so unfair. You've got you've got a postcode lottery. Some places only allowing you 1 round of IVF, some places allowing 3 rounds. Everyone putting different restrictions, and there are so many barriers. It was a fight at every stage to be able to get to treatment. So I'd fought really hard for it, and it was really, really difficult. And it didn't work. It didn't work through NHS, and then I had to go private.
How much? I mean, you don't have to tell me exactly how much, but that must be a costly,
costly
process.
So yeah, it is very expensive, because I mean it's worse now. So at the moment, only 35% of all IVF treatments are undertaken by NHS. Everyone else is having to go private. I mean, that's really damning. Women are being forced to go private, and it's extortionate. It's really, really expensive for families.
How did you have to borrow money, or did you save money?
I mean, to be fair, I was lucky because both me and my husband, I was an MP at that point, but even before, both me and my husband, we had enough savings, and we were able to go through it. But it's quite expensive if you have a median income. It can get very expensive.
So how many rounds of IVF did you have to have?
God, I got pregnant on my 5th one.
5th, 5 rounds of IVF.
5 rounds of IVF. Gosh. And it was really. So I was in politics before I became an MP. I was a local councillor, and I remember when I was going through my IVF, and it was really difficult because you don't want to tell anyone. You're a bit embarrassed because it feels, there's still the whole stigma around it where, it feels like you feel a bit of failure for not being able to conceive and so on. So you always hide that. I very much felt that stigma, so I didn't tell anyone. So it meant that I had to take breaks like halfway through my meetings to rush into the toilets where I will mix my drugs and, the solution and the powder and lots of different syringes and like inject myself and then rush and run back and it's difficult. It was really, really difficult. So there's a lot needs to be done to support women who are going through IVF. I believe in workplaces, a lot of support. Yeah, 5 rounds. Yeah, it's brutal.
I mean, every time that it does, the 5th one, you must have been absolutely ecstatic. But 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, how do you feel by the 4th time?
It is hard because so the first couple of times I had enough embryos to do 2 transfers, but then after that I didn't collect enough eggs, so you're having to go through the whole process of injections and blood tests and scans, and it's a lot of it's a lot of appointments, a lot of time off work, and you know, and it's still, it's still seen. I had to have I had several laparoscopies to identify the causes of my infertility. But we still look at infertility or fertility treatment as a lifestyle choice. It's not seen as a medical condition. So there's a lot, as I said, women have it really hard. And if everything, and I will say in health, is really stacked up against women. But it was hard. It was first couple of times I thought, okay, just started. But it then, you just, I think with the fifth one, I had no expectation. I thought it wouldn't work again. I didn't think it would work again. I actually went through, I had a transfer the week of my selection, when I first got selected as an MP. I remember thinking, if my transfer is on the day when the hustings are on Saturday, I'm just going to have to pull out of the hustings. There's no way. We tried for so long. And I thought, I've waited, I'd been involved and spent a lot of time in politics. I felt like, I wasted a lot of time. I was going to go for it. But I got a call saying, actually, embryos are not developing that well, so we're going to do an earlier transfer. So I had my transfer a lot earlier, a couple of days earlier, so I still went to the hustings. And when I got through, I thought, if something great in my life has happened, and I can't be that lucky. I'm not going to get pregnant as well, and I didn't. So, I kind of knew that, but in my heart. But yeah, it was. So when in March, when lockdown happened, I had an embryo, and I was just terrified that I was not going to get the opportunity to have my transfer and have and have the chance to become a mum again. I was absolutely terrified. So when the first opportunity came up, I went and had my transfer, and it was the right thing to do, and I got pregnant, and it was amazing. But so many women, because for NHS, basically IVF just stopped completely, and it's taken ages for it to restart again. So it's been hard. But yeah, now I have a little lovely, beautiful little munchkin. I have a daughter now who's 13 months old now.
Do you take her to Parliament?
She's at Parliament nursery. One of the other things. So when I all my pregnancy was through COVID, so I never got to do
Was your partner there at the birth?
He was. I was very lucky because he wasn't allowed into the scans throughout, which was terrifying. Because you're really happy, and because of my age and because I had IVF, I had extra scans, so they will suggest extra scans, which was terrifying anyway. So,
and he couldn't hold your hand while you're having your scans.
So I will be, it was just be absolutely terrified. But it was fine at the end of everyone. But yeah, so that was tough. But he was there for the birth, which was lovely. But my pregnancy was through COVID, so I never got to make friends. I never got to find out some of the normal things that they get told, like, register your child with register yourself with a local nursery, because places are really difficult to find. And I had it was really difficult to find a local place. So I brought her to the Parliament nursery, which she loves. She absolutely loves it there.
Is Parliament a welcoming place for new mums?
I was absolutely terrified when I got pregnant, because I was, because there is no formalised maternity leave. But it's been absolutely amazing. Everyone's been really, really helpful. And I was really lucky because as now have my votes in Parliament. But in the constituency, it was really lovely because I could take Esme out to meet constituents. Once we were able to. But everyone's been really, really helpful.
Because proxy voting stopped, didn't it, after COVID? I think I'm correct.
No, if you are pregnant, you get as a new mum.
You can't speak, but you can
yes.
vote. Right.
As a new mum, right. you can have a proxy vote for 6 months. If I had to change anything, I would change that to maybe 12 months. But other than that, the whips have been really understanding. Everyone's been really, really helpful. You know, there are lots of things, of course, there are lots of things you can improve. Just making sure, you know, that all the information's there, available, as like any other workplace would. And it wasn't, I had to go out and look for it and had to arrange meetings, I had to ask people about it. And so I was a bit scared, but it was fine. It's been a nice journey, to be honest with you.
Oh, that's nice to hear. Nice to end on that. Congratulations, and thank you for opening up and sharing lots of experience of a pretty difficult time trying to get pregnant. But congratulations that you have Esme now.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, you can watch all of Gloria's Real Me interviews on our YouTube channel or catch them on the Real Me podcast as well. Listen wherever you get your podcasts from. Just search for GB News in your podcast app. Well, it's been 40 years today since Terence Higgins died from an AIDS-related illness. Since then, so many thousands of lives have been saved, and being HIV positive is no longer the death sentence it once was. Well, I'm delighted to be joined now by Richard Angel, Campaigns Director for the Terence Higgins Trust. Thank you for joining us today. And I understand your organisation has done some polling released today on the back of this anniversary, looking at social attitudes towards how Brits feel about HIV and AIDS today. And not many people know quite the scientific and medical advances that have been made.
Thank you for having us on today, Tom. We've come a huge way in the 40 years since Terry Higgins was sadly one of the first named person in the UK to die of an AIDS-related illness. The doctors refused to tell his partner because he wasn't family what he died of and told him he had to read about it in a medical journal. They then turned their anger and their grief into action, and they set up a foundation that I'm lucky enough to work for today and continues to work in his. And the polling that we've done finds that only 38% of the public know that the science today means that somebody living with HIV, taking their medication and on effective treatment, cannot pass on the virus. But this is absolutely crucial. Everybody needs to know. The same poll found that 48% of people remembered those iceberg and tombstone ads, and that's where they're getting their knowledge about HIV from. So much has changed in that time. So if the last time you checked in about HIV was on those tombstone ads, get watching It's a Sin or the AIDS the Unheard tapes or any of the ways to update yourself about HIV today, because people on effective treatment cannot pass on the virus.
It's interesting because, of course, those famous tombstone adverts no doubt saved lives back when the virus was a death sentence, when there was no known or effective treatment. But I suppose that can't be begrudged. That action taken by the government was largely right. But in the intervening years, so much has changed. What more could the government be doing in this space? And is the goal of certain organisations to get transmission down to zero, really, in this country? Is that achievable?
So you're absolutely right. Those tombstone ads saved people's lives back then. But what's never happened is the remedial action to get people up to date with where HIV is today. You don't need to be scared of the virus. You need to test for it regularly. And if you test negative, there's ways to stay negative, like PrEP and condoms. And if you test positive, there is the best treatment and care in the world. Within days, you'll be on that treatment. The HIV will no longer be attacking your system. And crucially, you won't be able to pass it on to other people. So massive step forward. Because of condoms, PrEP, and that treatment as prevention that we just talked about, people not being able to pass it on, we have all of the tools to end new cases by 2030. And we're really pleased that Matt Hancock made a commitment to do that by 2030. And under Sajid Javid, they have launched an action plan to get there. There's a couple of things we'd liked in there that aren't in there, but it's a really good start. And they put 20 million in at the beginning to get opt-out testing. So everyone who goes to A&E in London, Manchester and Brighton will get tested for HIV just as routine, because that's how it should be done. I've got 30 more cities where I need to see that happening. Leicester, Luton, Southampton, Plymouth, Portsmouth, Blackpool and many others, which would be absolutely crucial. And actions like that, normalising HIV in the healthcare service, will save lives, will change lives and will mean people can go on and live long and healthy lives. Because those who are living with undiagnosed HIV are using the NHS. but the NHS isn't always seeing their undiagnosed HIV. So if we can change that testing, we can make a big breakthrough.
Well, Richard Angel, it's been so interesting to talk to you about this issue that, of course, doesn't just affect the LGBT community, although that was, of course, London Pride over the weekend. It also affects some other communities as well. And I suppose getting that testing expanded out is really, really important there. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Really appreciate your time. Well, just finally today, up next, it's On the Money, of course, with Liam Halligan, and he's here now. Liam, what's coming up on your show today?
We're going to focus on school meals, Tom. Not a typical subject for On the Money, really, but I've had a look at the funding for school meals, and I'm pretty shocked to see that it's falling way behind inflation. The government recently increased the amount of funding for school meals for infants by a colossal 7p a day. So schools now have to try and feed a young, hungry boy or girl for £2.41, up from £2.34. That's way behind the rate of inflation. So we're looking at that. And also, we're checking in with those fuel protests which are happening on motorways across Britain.
Well, Liam, I look forward to it. That, of course, coming up after the ads. You've been watching or listening to The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood. Thank you so much for your company. Of course, Liam's up next after the weather.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. A breezy day with showers in the north, but drier weather further south with some sunshine, although there is a lot of cloud at the moment as a couple of features sink south across the UK. Low pressure to the north, but high pressure is edging in, and that through the week will bring more and more settled weather, drier and warmer conditions for many, but not for all, because there will be some rain at times in the north and northwest especially, and a keen breeze at times, and that's the case through the rest of the day. The showers continuing for northern England, Scotland and Northern Ireland. Some heavy downpours for northeast Scotland, and that blustery breeze making it feel cool, 17 or 18 Celsius. But further south, with some sunshine coming through away from areas of cloud, 22 to 24 Celsius, so feeling warm with lighter winds. Through the evening, any showers in the north tend to fade away, but there'll still be a few continuing for the north and northwest of Scotland, 1 or 2 coming into northwest England, North Wales. More persistent rain perhaps for Northern Ireland, where it will be cloudy and 12 degrees. 10 or 11 elsewhere with some clear spells, especially towards the south and the east. So some sunshine first thing for southern England, the Midlands into eastern England. Bright spells as well for Scotland, with a few showers affecting northwest England, North Wales and Northern Ireland. But spell of more prolonged rain turns up later in the afternoon into western Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland. And again, high teens in the north, low 20s further south, not quite as warm, and actually a fair amount of cloud again for central and southern parts of the UK. So although the trend through the week is for dry conditions in the south and changeable in the north, there will be a lot of cloud for many. And it's going to be a damp day on Wednesday for western Scotland and Northern Ireland. Further south, some sunshine and turning warmer Thursday and Friday.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.